Hi, in today's video we're going to take a look at installing nixos with encrypted ZFS on root. And what we'll be doing is following this article on the nixos wiki, and what I'm going to do is actually take you through the steps to get this set up. So what we're going to be doing is, as I said, installing ZFS encrypted on root. We'll set up automatic scrubbing, automatic snapshots for ZFS, garbage collection for nixos. We'll be setting up the nvidia driver with the closed source driver so we have access to cuda. Then what we'll be doing is setting up home manager to install your applications. We'll also be setting up the gnome desktop and setting all the dconf settings with home manager. We'll also be setting up Firefox with home manager and configuring it, and also enabling widevine-cdm playback so that you can play back encrypted videos. So what I'm going to do is actually take you through the steps of getting this set up and point out a few gotchas along the way. So first of all, what we need to do is download the nixos ISO image. Now there's two ISO images. There's a graphical installer and the minimal installer, which is a command line version, which we're going to be using. And the reason for that is because we need to partition stuff in the terminal to get ZFS working. So first step is actually to download the ISO image, and what we're going to be doing is using wget with the -c option for continue, and then the link to the latest nixos minimal image, and this is the 2411 version. So download that. And next what we need to do is actually DD the image to a USB drive. So what you need to do is plug in your USB drive and then find the corresponding device with lsblk. So we run lsblk, and what we can see here is the device that I was using was SDC. So what we need to do, you strictly don't need to unmount the device, so it should just be unmounted anyway. But what we're going to do is actually use DD to write the image to the flash drive. And the syntax is like this. What we have is if and the path to the image, and then of and the path to the USB drive. So in this example here, what we have is the minimal ISO. So we have sudo dd bs equals 4m conv equals fsync offlag direct status progress, so we can see the progress of the writing the image to the USB drive. And then what we have here is if, and that is the path to the ISO file, followed by of, and that is the path to the USB drive. So in my case it was dev SDC. And you need to double check that, because otherwise you will overwrite your internal drive. So once we've done that, I said the unmount isn't strictly necessary. So again, plug it in, DD it to the USB drive, and we're on to the next step. So what we need to do is boot from the USB drive. I'm running on a Dell XPS 15 2019, and the key that you need to press to actually enter the BIOS is F2. So this depends on the machine that you're using. Typically it's F12. On the Dell it was F2. So when it boots up, press F2 repeatedly, and what you'll get is a BIOS screen. And in that screen you're going to search for sort of the boot options. It's got like a menu down the left hand side, and what you'll see is a list of the drives that it's going to boot in order, and it'll have the internal drive listed first, followed by the USB drive. And what you need to do is unselect the internal drive so that the USB drive boots first, and then click apply. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. And once you've done that, it's going to boot into nixos on the command line. So I believe what you need to do is, do you need to run sudo -i? I can't remember. So you should be automatically logged in. So you can use sudo without a password. So again, maybe you do need to press sudo -i. It's been a while. Okay, so what we're going to do is actually partition this. So it ships with multiple partitioning tools, but we're going to be using gdisk. So what you need to do is actually find the drive. Now, on the Dell XPS, the SSD is NVMe0M1, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a boot partition, a 1 gig boot partition with EFF. I'll go through the codes later. A swap partition, and then the rest is going to be the ZFS with root and an encrypted ZFS on root. So what we do is we run gdisk dev NVMe0M1, replace that with your drive, and I think from memory we then create a new partition. It's going to ask if you want to proceed, so this is basically going to wipe the partition table. Type Y and press enter to confirm you want to create a new empty GPT partition table. This effectively removes all partition information. So what we then do is write the changes to disk by pressing W, I think that's capital W, and then press enter, return. gdisk is going to ask you proceed. Yeah, press Y, enter. And then what we're going to do is after we've done that, we run gdisk again, and this is where we actually create the partition tables. So this section here is from this section on the wiki. So what we need to do first of all is run gdisk dev NVMe0N1, press N, and what this is going to do is actually create the boot partition. So we press 1 there. Now what you'll see here is if I come across this section here, when you press N, you press 1 for the first partition, and it's going to say first sector, just press return at that section. When we get to last sector in the prompt, what you need to do is press +1G. Okay, so first of all we pressed N, you press 1, and then for the last sector you press +1G, like that. Okay, and that's going to respond like this. Okay, so the first sector and the last sector is +1G. It's going to say the current type is 8300 Linux file system, and what you need to do is actually change the hex code to EF00, which is the EFI system partition. So we add EF00 to change the boot partition to an EFI partition. So for the swap, what we then do is we press N. Okay, the partition number we press 2. Yeah. For the first sector we just press return, and for the last sector that should be +8. We just correct that. So you press N, then you press 2 for the partition number. First sector you just press return, and the last sector you need to type +8G. Then what we're going to do is type 8200, and that's going to set the type to a swap partition. Now for the root partition, this is the final one. What we do is we then press N. Okay, we then press 3, and for the first sector we just press return. So press N, then press 3, and when we get to, we don't need, actually for the last sector we just press return as well, because it uses up the full space available. So finally what we need to do is change the hex code. When it gets to that section we type 8300, and that sets it to a Linux file system, but we're actually going to format that as ZFS. Okay, so then you write the changes with W and return, press Y, And what we're now going to see is if we run fdisk-l dev nvme0m1, that's actually going to show you the layout of the partition table. So what we're actually going to be doing is following this section down here. Okay, so we got this far, and what we see here is let's use variables from now on for simplicity. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to run blkid, and that's actually going to list out the partitions. Now this is the bit that had me stumped for a while. What we're actually going to be doing is setting variables to these partitions, and they end with part 1, part 2, and part 3. And what you'll notice is these are really long. Okay, thankfully you can use tab completion. So what we do, okay, so what you need to do is type boot equals dev disk by name nvme tab, right? But keep pressing tab until you get to part 1. You'll see some that have a slightly different ending, like part 1-p1 or something. Ignore those. These are the ones you want. So boot equals dev this by press tab until you get this completed, press return, then type swap equals dev disk by id nvme. You'll see these are all exactly the same. So what you just need to do is just press tab until you get part 2, right? Press return. Then that's going to set the swap to part 2. And finally disk, do the same thing, type it out, keep pressing tab until you get to part 3. Those should all be set. So the next step is actually creating the Z pool. So this is the command to actually create the Z pool, and then we're going to create the data sets. So what we have here is zpool create -capital O, is that capital O? Yeah. Encryption on, key format passphrase, so we're going to be using a passphrase and a prompt, compression, mount point none. We're not using legacy mount points with this, that's another thing I wanted to mention. What you'll see down at the end here is zpool disk. So what this is doing is that's using this disk variable here, which is set to the third partition, which is, the first partition is the EFI boot, the second is the swap, and the third is the rest of the drive. So what we're doing is we're creating a Z pool on the rest of the drive, excluding the EFI partition and the swap partition. What it's going to do is then ask you to enter a new passphrase to decrypt the drive. So what you're going to do is actually enter a passphrase that's going to come up during the boot process to unlock the drive. So you'll be asked to enter the new passphrase and enter it twice. And an important point to mention here is your console settings, the key map settings. By default, it's like set to US. So that's one issue that can kind of bite you, is if you change the key map after you've entered a ZFS password, you start typing it, and because you've changed the key map or something, it doesn't work. And typically you can get that with things like US keyboards versus UK keyboards, where you've got like different positions for the double quotes and the @ symbol. So after you've created the Z pool and you've entered the password that you're going to use, and remember to write it down. Yeah, important, write it down, otherwise you'll hit yourself. What we're going to do is actually create the data sets. So what we're going to do is create 4 data sets. We're going to create zpool root, zpool nix, zpool var, and zpool whom. home. Right, so gfs create zpool root, zpool nix, var and home. Right, after you've done that, what you need to do is mount root. So mkdir-p mount. The -p option means create the directory if it doesn't exist. We're then going to run mount with the -t option to specify ZFS. zpool root is then going to be mounted to mount out ZFS util. Right, after that, what we're going to do is create some subdirectories. So we're going to run mkdir mount nix, mount var, and mount home. Once we've done that, what we're going to do is same sort of thing. Mount with the -t option, ZFS, zpool nix to mount nix -o ZFS util. We're then going to mount the var directory to mount var, the zpool var to mount var, and mount the zpool home to mount home. Once you've done that, you can run zpool status and you should be able to see the layout. What we're now going to do is actually format the partitions that we created. So remember we had the boot, we created the variables for boot and swap as well. So what we're going to do is run mkfs.fat -F32-n boot and boot, and that refers to the first partition. We're then going to run mkswap-L swap, the swap partition, and then swap on. Okay, got that? Let's just recap. So we created the zpool, set the encryption into the passphrase. We created the datasets. We then mounted the datasets. Once all that was done, we checked the zpool status. We formatted the boot partition and enabled swap. Now we can move on to the installation. What we need to do now is mount the boot directory. So we run mkdir-p mount boot to create the mount boot directory, and then we mount boot to mount boot. So this mounts the, remember the boot variable refers to the part 1 of the drive that we created, and this is why you need to set these variables, because otherwise you'd be typing out stuff and making mistakes. So once mount boot is mounted, we can actually generate the nixos configuration. So we run nixos generate nixos-generate -config --root mount, and what it's going to say is writing hardware configuration and configuration.nix to those directories. So now what we're going to do is actually edit these files. So we've got two files. We've got the configuration.nix and we've got the hardware configuration.nix. So what I'm going to do is actually just double check through my configuration here. So okay. So this is the configuration, and let me just double check this. So after the imports block, add the following. Okay, let me just check. ZFS, yeah, okay. So the first thing that we want to do is, you can see here, imports equals, and it will have hardware configuration.nix. What we're going to do under this section is set systemd.services.zfs-mount.enable equals false. And what this does is systemd can actually manage mounting the partitions, that sort of thing, and we need to set that to false. Okay, so that's the first step. Okay, systemd services ZFS mount enabled false. What we then need to do is actually generate a networking host ID, and the way you do that is by running this command here, head-c8 etc machine ID, and that's going to give you something like this. And what we then do is set networking.host ID equal to that. So just come across here, host ID, yeah, so you can see here networking host ID. So set that under there. So we disabled systemd services ZFS mount, and we set the networking.host ID equal to what we created with the head command here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is actually check the hardware configuration and see what's missing. And we need to change the generated swap devices that we created. So what happens is when it creates the hardware configuration file, it's going to have some settings in there that we actually need to change. Okay, so what we're going to do is edit that file, and there's something I wanted to mention that's a big gotcha. So I've actually got Vim enabled. I think Vim's actually enabled by default, thankfully. So let's just go through this. Okay. Right, so you can see here, this is the setup we've got here. Zpool root, type ZFS, options, ZFS util, got nix, we've got var, we've got home, we've got boot, we've got swap device. Now, this is the tricky bit. Okay. So the issue that is not explained, that is a real gotcha, is what you need to do is actually, you know, these like boot and swap variables that we created, which point to those long paths to the drive, you know, like part 1 and part 3. Is it part 1? No, it's part 1 and part 2. Boot is part 1, swap is part 2, and the rest of the drive is part 3. What we need to do is actually put those paths into the next configuration, into the hardware configuration. Now the problem is you've got no copy and paste. Okay, so let me kind of sort of explain this. What I'll do, copy this to the desktop. Bugger. So let me see if I've got this set here. Okay, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. See, under this section here, file name is boot. There's device, dev disk by ID, nvm micro, dash underscore underscore. All right, there's no way that you're going to be able. You can't. The issue is you can't copy and paste in the terminal, so you can't copy the this path and then go and edit the hardware configuration.nix and paste it in. Okay, so we need to get this path and this path into this file, right? But without any copy and paste. And there's no way that you're going to, if you try and write this down, it's like, how many underscores is that? And is it, you know, you're going to make a mistake, guaranteed. So what I figured out was we've got those variables created, okay? Boot and swap, those variables are created, and they point to those partitions. So what you need to do is you cd mount etc nixos, and in that directory is the configuration.nix and the hardware configuration.nix. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a backup of the hardware configuration.nix. So cp hardware configuration.nix, hardware configuration.nix.back. This is the clever part. What we're going to do is we're going to echo the variable which points to the drive, to the boot and the swap partition, and append it to the hardware configuration.nix file. Okay, so show you what I mean. So let's do this. So I'm going to copy this, and what I'm going to do is come across to the terminal and emulate what we're doing. So boot equals that. So echo boot, right? It will all make sense in a second, right? And that was swap. So swap equals that. Echo swap. So you can see that when I come back to here, remember further back in the file, what we did was we set the boot and the swap to those partitions by using the tab completion. Okay, so what we do is we echo the boot into the hardware configuration and append it to the end of the file and the swap. Okay. Let me just open up a new tab to show you. So here's the hardware configuration.nix file. Right, and what I'm going to do is actually append those to the file. So, right. Now if I come back here, down at the end, what you will see is we have now appended part 1 and part 2. So part 1 is the boot, is the UFI, and part 2 is the swap. So what you need to do is come into this devices section here. Okay, let me just delete it so it makes sense. Okay, so now that what we then just do, we take these pieces here, device. You can do this with Vim in the terminal. I'm just showing you how to do it. Swap device there. Okay, that should all make sense. You CD into the mount, etc. nixos. You make a backup of the hardware configuration.nix. You then echo boot, double right triangle. What that means is append to the end of the file. Do the same for the swap. Okay. You then edit the hardware configuration.nix and add the boot and swap to the config. Once you've done that, you've got it all working. You can delete the hardware configuration.nix back with the -I option that will prompt you to delete the file in case you accidentally remove the wrong one. So hopefully that makes sense. You append those things to the end of the file. You come through and then edit the appropriate section. The device here for boot, which is part 1, and the swap is part 2. Okay. Right. Move on. If I can remember the right key. Yeah, there we go. So after we've done that, what we do is we generate the base nixos configuration files again. So we run nixos generate -generate -config --root mount. Okay. So now what we need to do is actually open the configuration.nix and a text editor, which is going to be Vim because we're working in the terminal, and change the import to include hardware configuration. I don't know why I've got that there. dfs.nix, my bad. Yeah, I think I just got this from somewhere, so just ignore that. Yeah, so just ignore this bit. Right. So what we're going to be doing is actually working with the configuration.nix. So let's open that. Right. So let's come down to the ZFS boot settings. I'll give you this in context. Okay. All right. So boot supported file system ZFS, boot ZFS dev node. Have I got that? These are notes I took. Let me just check. Supported file system. I don't think that's actually in there. Okay, no, ignore that. So dev nodes, we can ignore that as well, I think. Yeah, okay. So, right, ignore this bit here. We already set the host ID. Okay, right, so we'll just get rid of this bit. Okay, so this is the next important bit, the password. So what we're actually going to be doing is two things here. You can see user mutable users equals true, users username initial password equals password. So what this does is this sets an initial password so that we can log in, okay? And what this user mutable users equals true means is that you can, once you've logged in to the GUI, you can run the password command and create a new password, because you don't want to keep your main password in your nixos configuration file that you got on GitHub. So what we do, let me see if I've got the users mutable. Okay. So what you do is have these two sections. Users mutable equals true, users username. I can't remember offhand if we need to change that to our username. My bad. I think this this section here, username, maybe needs to be changed to your username that we're actually going to set in the configuration. So you have these two sections, and then as I said, what you can do once you've got everything set up, you log into GNOME or whatever desktop you've got set up, you run the password command, you set a new password. Then what you do is you edit the configuration.nix file, you remove this line, and you do a sudo or doas nixos -rebuild switch, and then you reboot. And what will happen then is it will have removed the initial password we set and used the one that you set with the password command. That makes sense, yeah? So you create an initial password, you set this option here so that you can actually change that password with the password command. Set the password, you remove this line, and then you rebuild. Okay. ZFS maintenance settings. Okay. Let me just check this. Auto scrub. Where's the auto scrub? Yeah. Okay. I don't have trim. Auto scrub pools. Okay, let me just check this. These were kind of notes I was writing as I was actually going along. So we don't want trim. Auto scrub. Yeah. Okay, so what we do is we set this option here. ZFS-auto scrub enables true, and that's going to automatically scrub the pool. Okay. Right. Okay, and this was the section about the hardware configuration.nix. All right, let me just check this. Right, so what you'll see here is in the hardware configuration.nix, we need to add ZFS util to every ZFS system block. So you can see here the file system pull root type ZFS options ZFS util. So you can see for each of these ones we need to add options ZFS util like that. Okay, and we did the swap devices in the previous thing. That's where I echoed the variables into file. So basically what I was saying is by default it's something like this. And what we did was we set the device here to part 1 and part 2. You can see VFAT for the boot, swap device random encryption true. Don't worry, I'll post links to all this so you can go through it. Okay, so we got to that section. We can now run nixos install -- show trace -- root mount. Show trace will actually show any errors. So what we're actually going to do is, let me just go through this. So here's the hardware configuration. Yeah, so what we've got is we've got the this section here, available kernel modules. You can go through, copy all of this, KVM, Intel, got the file systems with the ZFS util, and we got the boot and swap set with the correct swap and boot device. So I've come back into configuration.nix. What you're going to need to do is actually gradually add bits of code to the configuration.nix and run nixos install show trace check. Yeah. Right, okay. So what we're going to do is just quickly have a look through this. So we've got the imports, we've got the hardware configuration.nix. Okay, let me just increase the file size here so you can see it a bit better. So one of the common errors that you're going to get is putting bits of code in the wrong place. Issues with kind of semicolons and stuff. It's bound to happen. You're going to put something in the wrong place. You're going to get an error, and basically to fix the error, you're just going to need to move things about a bit to make sure in the right section. So what we've got here is use the systemd boot EFI loader. So we've got bootloader systemd boot enable true. Bootloader EFI can touch EFI variables equals true, and boot temp clean on boot equals true. And what that's going to do is that's going to clean out the boot the temp directory every time you reboot, so it doesn't get full up. So again, this is the ZFS section we set up. The systemd services ZFS mount enables equals false. Networking host ID, which we set with the head command. This is what we're talking about, the console key map. Console key map equals US. You're going to need to make sure that you don't mess up the console key map after you've typed in the ZFS password, because otherwise you won't get back in. We've got nix pkgs config allow unfree equals true, so that allows unfree software. And what we've got down here is the networking section. So networking host name. So this is where you define your host name. And this is the network manager enables true. So this will enable the network manager in your distro so that you can manage your network basically. So in the next section, what we've got down here is set your time zone. So what I recommend is actually I think you need to, each time you need to do this, let me just check. So we did the nixos install show trace. Can't remember if we run that or we actually run the nixos build. I think we need to run the nixos build. Was it nixos rebuild switch after each time we make a change? But basically what you want to do is add bits one by one and do a rebuild to actually see if you get any errors. You can just copy a lot of this stuff, be able to pull it down and just copy this, make your life easier. So we set the time zone. Time zone equals wherever you are. And what we've got down here is system auto upgrade. So what we've got is system auto upgrade equals true, daily, allow reboot false. So what that's going to do is every day it's going to automatically check for an upgrade, and it won't automatically reboot like Windows when it's done an upgrade. Typically I found this actually does it at midnight. Okay, the next thing we've got down here is nixos garbage collection. And what this will do is, with nixos, every time you sort of do a rebuild, it creates a new version you can kind of boot into. And what this does is this will automatically delete the older versions of the, I don't know what you call it, on FreeBSD, they're kind of like boot environments that you boot into, kind of like different revisions. So what this is going to do is basically automatically delete the revisions that are older than a week. So you can change that to whatever you want, and that will basically stop you having millions of these revisions that you can revert to. And one of the issues is, I think I'm not sure 100% if they're stored in the boot. So you don't want to fill up the boot EFI partition with all the revisions. I may be completely wrong about that, but this is a good thing to set, so that basically going to automatically upgrade and automatically remove revisions older than the week. You can set that to 14 days or whatever you want. Okay, what we've got next down here is the locale. So this is where you actually set the locale. So this is ENGB for English. You've got all these settings down here. If you want to enable nix flakes, which I haven't quite got into yet, what you do is add nix.settings.experimental-features equals nix command and flakes. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. We're getting onto the services and enabling the X11 window system. Even though I've written X11 there, we're actually using Wayland. So what we've got here is services, X server enables equals true. We've got video drivers equals nvidia. And this is where we've actually got gnome set up. So we've got display manager, GDM enables equals true. Desktop manager, gnome enables equals true. If you want a different desktop, that's where you change it. KDE, Sway, whatever it is. Next thing that we've actually got is the XKB, so we can actually set the layout. So we've got XKB layout is GB, variant is Mac, and this is the ZFS auto scrub enabled I mentioned. And what this section here is, this is Z snap send, and what this does is it actually, there's a couple of tools that can take snapshots, but this is the one I chose. I believe it can also actually send snapshots automatically. So Z snap send enables equals true, auto creation equals true, pure equals true, Z setup. So what this is going to do is this is just going to take snapshots of the home directory, of the home pool rather, because we don't need to take snapshots of the Nix directory because it's got the revision, so it's kind of pointless. So what we got is zpool home, recursive equals true, mbuffer enable equals true, and this is the plan. And what this does is this takes snapshots every hour. So you can see, can break it down. It says like 1 hour is greater than an hour, so it's going to take a snapshot every single hour. 1 day is greater than a day. 1 week's greater than a day. 1 month is less than a week. So what it does, this basically takes snapshots every hour, every day, and keeps them for a week, and then kind of removes them. So it's automatically taking snapshots every hour, and then it will keep them all for a week. And you can change this by looking at the documentation if you want change it to longer. Okay, right, that's another thing. fwup enabled. What that is so that you can update the firmware on your system. Let me just see if I've got that. Yeah, fwup. Okay. So what we've got here is fwup enabled equals true, and I'll show you the actual procedure while it's fresh in my mind that's what we're talking about. So at a later stage, when you've got everything working and configured, so you have that enabled, and what you do is you run fwup dmagr, get devices, and then you download the latest metadata from the Linux vendor firmware service. So you run fwup dmgr refresh, get updates, update, and then you get updates, and then update. And what that's going to do is that's going to update the firmware on the machine, basically. So I'll put links to that, so don't worry. Thermals enabled, that's for power, that's like the thermals. Open SSH enabled true. This is so we've got access to SSH so that we can, push our configuration to GitHub, that sort of thing. Printing enabled false, that disables the cups daemon, I think. Lib input enabled true, that's for your touchpad. Okay, so we got the firmware, thermals, OpenSSH, printing, and touchpad. Then what we've got down here is pipewire. So pipewire enabled true, pulse dash enabled equals true. I mean, even though it says pulse enabled true, we're actually using pipewire. Also, what we've got here is gnome local search enabled false. What I do is I disable the search functionality in gnome, because what happens is there's actually, it used to be called something like network miner or something bizarre, but what happens is, like when you come up here, type to search, what it does is, this box up here, so you can search for files and all that kind of stuff. Problem is it basically runs an indexer constantly, searching for all your new files and all that kind of stuff, and it uses a lot of the CPU. So you'll be sitting there wondering why I'm not doing anything. Why is my CPU going crazy? And that's the reason, basically, is because of the local search. If you want it, don't use that, but I dislike it, so I remove it. So next section here, hardware. nvidia.open equals false. This is important. By default, what it's going to do is use the open source NVIDIA drivers, which don't work with CUDA. Okay, CUDA is so that you can use hardware video encoding for things like OBS Studio, Handbrake, FFmpeg, DaVinci Resolve, that kind of thing. So we set nvidia.open to false. Then we have this graphics section here. Enables equals true, extra packages with PKG, VAPI. So these are like VAPI, lib. I can't even pronounce that. But you basically want these options here for graphics, and that's for sort of hardware accelerated playback with things like MPV. Okay, and this was the user's mutable true section I was mentioning before, so that after we've set the initial password, we can then actually change it as I described earlier. Okay, so this is where we define a user account. So users, your username. So I think that initial password that I was mentioning, where it said kind of like users, username, you've actually got to put your username in, but you're going to have to check the documentation for that. I can't remember offhand. So what we've got here, this is where we define the user account. So users, username is normal user true, extra groups. So extra groups, we've got wheel, network manager, audio and video. And what we've got here is programs. So we're actually not going to be configuring all the programs in the configuration.nix. And the reason for that is because what it means is every time you make a change, you got to rebuild the whole system. So we're using home manager separately. So we've got program ZSH enable true, enable completion, syntax highlighting as well. And what we have here is dconf enable true, and this is for GNOME so that we can actually use home manager to configure GNOME using dconf. Okay, MTR, I forget what that is offhand. It's related. Can't remember what that's related to. I think it's actually to do with the GNU PG agent. So we actually configure the GNU PG agent, enable SSH support, and what this will allow you to do is store your GPG and SSH key in the GNOME password manager. And first time you do, you know, when you kind of like do SSH-add and typically you run something like, it's actually eval $ parentheses SSH-agent close parentheses and then shush-add, and it prompts you for the password. What will happen is you'll get a GUI pop-up where you enter the password and it'll say, do you want to add this password to the keyring? And what that will do is that will store your SSH key in the GNOME password manager, so that when you boot in, you can use SSH on the command line without having to enter your password every time. Okay. Then what we've got is users, username, username here. .shell equals pkg -zsh. So this is where we actually set the shell that we're going to be using. We can enable sudo, security sudo enables equals true. There is actually no sudo as file on nixos. So what we're actually going to be doing is using doas. So what we've got here is security doas enables equals true, extra config. And what we've got here, this section, let me just check that is there's a doas section. Okay, check. Yeah. Okay, so what I've got here, allow user, permit, keep environment, set environment path, then my username, allow root to switch to our user. And what I've just done is basically set no path. So what happens is I can just run doas in any command and not be prompted for the password. The order of these things matters. I actually have nixos rebuild switch here, but because we've got the no pass option, we can just use doas without being prompted for the password. But what you can do is you can actually set specific commands you want to use without having to enter the password. And what you need at the bottom is root as root, permit no pass, keep environment, set environment path, root as root. So that's doas. So doas is much better used than sudo. So right, what we've got here is GNOME remove packages. So as you know, GNOME will come with a bunch of stuff, most of which you probably not going to want to use. And what you can actually do is configure nixos to exclude those packages from the install. So environment GNOME exclude packages with PKGs. You can see here I'm excluding GNOME Photos, Tor, the GNOME Tor, the GNOME text editor. And in this next section here, I'm moving cheese, the calendar, contacts, clocks, music, maps, epiphany, geary, name characters, weather, simple scan, and totem. So that's how you can actually remove the gnome packages that you don't want to use. There may be a similar thing for something like KDE, but you're going to need to look that up. Okay, this package is installed in the system profile. Okay, so what we've got here is environment system packages with BKGs. And this section here, we've got Vim. So basically what that means is that we've always got Vim enabled so that we can edit the configuration files. Okay, and this is the firewall. So networking firewall allowed TCP ports 6881, UDP port 6882, and this is useful for stuff like torrents, and I'll show you how to set up transmission when we get to the home manager. Okay, as I say, there's quite a bit to get through, so that's why I'm kind of going through. Yeah, this is another useful one. System copy copy system configuration equals true. Copy the nixos configuration file and link it from the resulting system. So what this does is actually makes a backup of the configuration.nix to run current system configuration.nix. So in case you do something stupid and accidentally delete the configuration file as you're doing something, you've actually got a backup. So that's a good option. Okay, I don't think there's anything else. And at the bottom, we've got the system state version, so that's 24.11. So that is the gist of the configuration. Right. So as I said, what you're going to do is add the options as you go. So I think what you do from memory, which I should have put down here, is you, first of all, you install. And then what you do is you edit, and I think you do the nixos rebuild switch each time you make an edit. Once you've got everything set up, what I would recommend is trying to get everything set up so that when you do a reboot, you actually boot into a GUI desktop. So that it's just going to make things easier. So that's what I did. I painfully went through everything I've just showed you, adding it bit by bit till I got everything working and didn't get any errors. I said most of the time when you get errors, it's because you put something in the wrong block. Yeah. So what you basically do is you run sudo umount -r mount and then sudo shutdown now. Okay, we did the ZFS scrubbing. So home manager. So once you actually booted into the GUI, first thing you want to do, as I said, as I mentioned, is you set the password. So password, enter a new password, you edit the configuration.nix, you remove the initial password, you do a sudo nixos rebuild switch, is it? Reboot, and you can then log in with your new password. So after you've done that, what you're going to want to do is actually set up the home manager. So what we've got here is nix channel --add and the release here. So this release needs to match the release that is specified in your configuration.nix. So I was running 24.11. So we run this command nix channel, 24.11 home manager. Then we do nix channel --update. And then nix shell home manager -a install. I think that's the end of that section. So what I'm going to do is actually take you through the home manager now. So let's go across to the home manager. Okay, so the home manager settings are actually in .config home-manager. What you'll see here is I've got home.nix and I've got this thing that says program. So I'll get to the programs in a second. So this is the home manager. Bastard, come on. Right. So first of all, we've got home manager, username, your username, home manager, home directory. I can't remember if that's set automatically or not. Then we've got the home state version. So that's the version of home manager which needs to correspond to the same version in your configuration.nix. We've got this import section I'll get to, where we're going to import some nix files. What we've got here is xdg directories. So what you see here is user directories enables true, create directories equals true, public share equals null, templates equals null. So typically when you boot up, when you install something like gnome, okay, what you'll typically get is like a public folder and a templates folder, which I never use. And what happens is you try and delete them, you reboot and they get recreated. Yeah. So this is how you set them not to be created. Public share equals null, templates equals null. So what that does is that allows you to specify which xdg directories you don't want created. What we've got down here is nix pkg's config allow unfree true. So this allows unfree software. We need to, even though we've got it specified in the configuration.nix, we need to specify it here as well. What we've got here is programs.emacs enabled equals true, package pkg emacs -pgtk, and that's the pure GTK version of Emacs, which means that it's a native Wayland application, as you can see here. Okay, all right. So home packages with packages. This is how you install stuff, right? This is where you install all the things that you want. So we've got a book, which is like a command line address book. APG is to create passwords. We've got the Alacrity terminal, ARIA 2, which is a downloader, a spell for spelling. BC is a command line calculator. We've got Chromium, curl, dict, which is a dictionary, dconf editor, editing dconf. FD is the Rust version of find. We've got ffmpeg full. We've got the file command. We've got fear of a code for fonts. We've got git. We've got gnome tweaks. Handbrake for converting videos. Image magic. This is another font here. libnotify is for the notify send command. So you can run like notify send hello, and it will come up with a notification, and that's useful for using in scripts. libwebp is to enable webp image support. Got Kodi Wayland. Kodi is a multimedia player. You've got MPC, which is used with the music player daemon. So MPC and MPD, that's the music player daemon. We've got MPV, which is MPV, the video player. NCDU, which is command line disk usage. NCMPC is a client for MPD. Got fear of code. Noto fonts emoji, you want that because typically if you're using MPV to play YouTube videos, a lot of them have emojis in the title, and what happens is you'll get like broken font symbols. Otherwise, OF toolkit is to use the OF tool command to generate the two-factor authentication keys. We've got OBS Studio. We've got Alarma CUDA, so that's Alarma running with CUDA support. Unfortunately, the version of Alarma is quite old. It's 0.312, whereas the latest is like 0.68. So there's I've been trying the last couple of days to use an overlay to update Alarma, but without success. So you can run DeepSeek, but not some of the later models. So it's a bit of a pain. Got OpenVPN for your VPN. Pandoc to convert documents. Pin-free curses is for when you use things like GPG, it's so that you get a pop-up menu where you can pop-up dialog where you can enter your password. Player CTL is to use with applications that have got Empress support. So player CTL can be used to pause, play, stop stuff like playing in Firefox or Chromium, and also with MPV, which I'll show you how to enable MPV with Empress support. Okay, this one here, real-esrgan-ncnn-vulkan. This is for image upscaling. So if we have a look here, you can see this screenshot from Akira. So what I'll do is just open the image viewer and across to my pictures, wallpaper. There's this one and this one. Okay, so you can see the original one is 360 kilobytes. The upscaled is 12.7. So I've opened those two. So here's the original screenshot from Akira, the 1988 film, and this was taken by pressing S on the keyboard using MPV to take a screenshot. You can see it's quite grainy here. Yeah, there's a lot of grain. If I now switch to the version upscaled, okay, you see that? Grainy, upscaled, okay? So what I'll do is I'll actually just take you to that page. Okay, so for anime images, okay, so package name there, anime images, you run the command -i input -o output n, and then this command here, anime video 3 s2. Okay, for photographic images, you want to use the X4 Plus version. Okay, so that's how you can upscale images. So much nicer. I think you'll see it does a great job with anime and also photos. Okay, so ripgrep. Is a Rust version of rep. We've got socks for audio, tmux, translate shell, so that's like Google Translate, transmission. So this is transmission _4-GTK. So there isn't actually any options to configure transmission with Home Manager. So let me just open up transmission. Okay, so here's transmission. I'll come to the preferences and the network section. Okay, you can see here port used for incoming connection 6881. This is the port that I specified to be open in the firewall in the configuration.nix. So got speed, got downloading. So what I do is automatically add torrents from downloads, save to location complete and incomplete. So what I've got is files, I've got torrents, complete and incomplete. Yeah. So what you do is you specify save to location complete, keep incomplete torrents in incomplete. So keeps things nice and tidy. Seeding, set your seeding, privacy, network here, desktop. So we got here show a notification when torrent finishes. So what that does is that shows a notification when the torrent's finished. Okay. TS, that's for task spooler, and that allows you to queue commands up to be executed sequentially one after another. We've got unzip, we've got YTDLP, which you know what that does. wget. Now this is the important one. Widevine-cdm. Okay, then we've got WL clipboard, the Fiora, and zip. So widevine-cdm is to enable widevine DRM playback in Firefox. We're not going to be using Chromium for that. Chromium has dropped support for manifest v2 extensions like uBlock, so you can only use uBlock Origin, so you can only use uBlock Origin Lite. The issue is it's not very good, and it doesn't block pre-roll or adverts during video. So if you use Widevine with Firefox, you won't get any adverts, but if you were to use Chromium or Google Chrome, you would. Okay. What we've got here is home session variables, the X cursor theme, adwaiter, and the X cursor size. And this is needed for some applications where, really annoyingly, what happens is you move your cursor over the application and your cursor would disappear. Now, another thing I need to mention while it's in my mind is, as you're installing these things, you can do a home manager switch, right? So like you go and install some application like transmission, you run home manager switch, you come up to search for it, and there's nothing there. There's no item listed in the application launcher. The reason for that is you actually need to log out and log back in to create a new session for the application to show up. There are kind of like mad workarounds that I've seen, but to be honest, it's just easier just to log out and log back in, and then you'll see the application show up. Just something that will kind of get you. So what we've got down here is services, Emacs enabled true. This kind of enables the Emacs client, the package, PKG, Emacs, pure GTK. Then what we've got is the gnome keyring. So we enable the gnome keyring. GPG agent enable true, extra config, allow Emacs pin tree, allow loopback pin tree, and that basically allows us to use the GPG agent with like Emacs. What we've got down here is MPD. This is the music player daemon, enable true, music directory, yeah, network start when needed equals true. So that basically it's like when you sort of start up NCMPC or your front end, it will automatically start MPD. And this is the extra configuration for MPD using pipewire, my pipewire output. Then what we've got down here is systemd user session variables. We set the SSH auth sock. So this is run user. This is your user ID, which should be 1000, and the Wayland display. And this is needed to set the SSH auth sock so that you can it works with the shush password saved in your password manager. What we got down here is GTK enable equals true. This is the GTK extra config. So what we're doing here is setting the dark theme to be the default. So GTK application preferred dark theme true, and the same for GTK4. Okay, MPV Empress. This is what I was talking about. This enables Empress support in MPV so that you can use there's a built-in keyboard shortcut in GNOME that will allow you to pause and play videos that have Empress support. So enabling this also works with player CTL so that you can play pause videos with MPV using command line keyboard shortcuts or on the command line. Okay, and that's pretty much that. Home session variables. Okay, so what we're going to have a look at now is these sections here. Imports. We've got dconf and Firefox. Okay, so what you'll see. So programs, what we've got here is dconf and Firefox. So what I'm going to do is go through dconf first. Okay, so dconf. Let me bring up the dconf editor. So this is the dconf editor, and what you'll see here is when you set, let me bring up the setting. Well, you know, when you go through and you set different options in the settings, you know, to configure things like let me just Come here. You know, touchpad, mouse and keyboard. You know, like natural scrolling. All these kind of options in here. Yeah. Whether you want traditional or natural scrolling, all those kind of things. Those are set in dconf. And so you can come through like gnome, you'll see all these different things, like shell, all these different options in here, like desktop, background, interface, all these kind of things. Rather than actually manually going through and setting all of those options, what you can do is set the dconf options with Home Manager. So what we've got here is prefer dark. So for instance, you can see here the path, gnome desktop input sources. Let me just bring up dconf again. I'll bring it up on the next screen. Dconf. Bastard. Okay, gnome desktop input sources, gnome desktop. What was it? Input sources. Okay, input sources. So you can see here, color theme, prefer dark. So what you can do is you can use dconf and manually come through and set all of these kind of things, or you can set them on the command line. But what I'm saying is you can do the whole thing with Home Manager. What you'll also notice here is this thing here, sources, list of input sources. This is where you can set the key map. So we've got XKB options. And what I've got is a custom XKB setup to swap some keys, so I can actually automatically set that. So this is where I can actually set the XKB option. So I actually swap left alt and left control, and I've got an option that swaps sterling for number sign, because on the key map that I was using, the number 3 should be sterling, but it was actually swapped with something else by default. Okay, so that's like where you can set the input sources for stuff like the key map. Got the desktop interface, clock show date false, weekday false, prefer dark, enable animations false. So this is where I turn off the animations. Touchpad, so desktop peripherals, touchpad. Natural scroll false, 2-finger scroll enabled. Okay, and this is where you can actually configure the key bindings for the WM, that's the window manager. So like I set close to be shift super C. What I have here is move to monitor left, shift super H, move to monitor right, shift super L. And what I've got here is stuff to move stuff to workspaces. So to move stuff to workspace 1, it's shift super. You can see here it's like exclamation. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. So I can press shift super 1 to move a window to the first virtual desktop, second, third, fourth. Switch applications. So when I press super and J, see I get the heads up here. And what I've got here is switch to workspace. So if I press super 1, super 2, super 3, super 4, whatever, it switches to those workspaces. I can also press super H or L. So H goes that way, L goes that way. We've got Mutter here, center new windows, dynamic workspace, focus change on pointer rest. So that is to do with how the focus works, basically. So it doesn't automatically sort of focus when you do something. We've got the overlay key. So this is super L. So when I press super L, I get the overlay up here to search for stuff and launch applications. Media keys. So what I've got here is play. So when I press Alt, Super, and Space, what that does is that toggles play and pause using Empress. So whether it's Firefox, MPV, or Chromium, it will pause or play that. We specify the volume step. We've got the power settings, so I don't like the screen to go idle or automatically sleep, so that's where you set that. Key bindings, switch to application, so you can see by default those keys were like interfering with how you switch to the workspaces, which is why I've set them to empty. Organo, shell, Ubuntu, again prefer dark. Enable location false. We turn off the audio audible bell in the gnome desktop WM preferences. So these are the same gnome desktop WM preferences. So these are all these settings that we're talking about here. So we can set that. These are auto raise true, focus mode sloppy, and that is how we configure dconf. So what I'm going to do now is take you through Firefox. Okay. So remember in the home.nix we had that little import statement that imported these files. What we've got here is programs Firefox enabled true, and let me just come back to config home manager home.nix Firefox. So what you'll notice is we've got this import section here, and Firefox isn't actually listed in this section here. See, we've got home packages with PKGs and all the things we want to install. You'll notice Firefox is not set in this section, right? The reason is because we're actually setting it up in this separate Firefox.nix thing, and we're using this other syntax like program Firefox enabled equals true. That's how we actually install it. This is the package, and what we've got here is the extra policies. So if I come across to Firefox, open the settings, you see we've got sort of all these settings, okay? Home, you know, how you want all these things set up, all these things that you go through and untick, yeah? Strict, you know, all this stuff, right? Typically, you have to go through and set it, you know, and it's a bit of a pain. So what we can do is we can actually set all those options in this nix file. So we can disable Firefox studies, pocket, telemetry, Firefox accounts, no bookmarks, you know, set to don't save passwords. And what we've got down here is the profile. So what you see here is profile default is default true, extra config. And you see this stuff here. Right, what that is you know in Firefox you go to about config. And what you can do is you can actually set configuration options using about config. What you can also do is create a user.js file and put those settings that you would normally put in about config in the file. You then have to open the Firefox profile and copy that user.js file into your Firefox profile. And the name changes every time, so there's an easy way to actually do that automatically. What this is all the options that you would set in about config or put in the user.js file automatically applied. So we've got beacon enabled false. You know, when you use the config, when you do about config and it says, you sure you want to do this? We set that to false. Strict blocking, so this is strict blocking here under privacy and search, strict blocking. Download don't open panel, there is a new option where like every time a download completed it would automatically open a panel. And also downloads button, tab manager. I think that some of these options you may not want. It's just, you know, my personal thing. I think the tab manager was the you get that little tiny little thing, you'd click there and it'd come up with all your tabs and all that kind of stuff. I don't like that, so I disable it. Safe browsing, malware, hidden, so I can actually hide all the search engines I don't want. Search suggest false, search in the toolbar, 10 pings. Okay, home page blank, startup page blank. So that's this. Home page and new windows should be blank. So when I open a new tab, it doesn't open up with anything. Tabs, Firefox view. I think that's that Firefox view thing I was talking about. Tab manager, activity stream. You can go through these and check what all these do. Browser UI density, so that's like if you want compact. I'm just seeing if there's anything else that comes up. You can search for all of these. Top sites false. Disable things like the experiments and that kind of stuff. Disable Pocket, all the Pocket stuff. Credit card autofill. Media autoplay. Enable magnet links for torrent clients. Privacy stuff. Desktop and notifications true. I set the side. I don't like the sidebar, so I hide the sidebar and the vertical tabs. What you can also do is actually have user Chrome. So you have like user chrome.css, so you can actually modify the Firefox interface. So what this does is actually remove a lot of the stuff from the content from the Firefox menu. So if I come across here and I like right click, see that's all I've got in my thing. Normally you have like loads of you can see I've copy, now I've got something selected, copy, print, translate to English. You can see normally you'll have a shed load of options like bookmark link, take screenshot, save page, select all, back for all that kind of stuff. I actually sort of remove a lot of that stuff, like copy and paste, all that kind of stuff. Okay, now this is the important part, settings. This is where we enable widevine. So we've got settings. You just bring that down a bit. Media GMP widevine enabled equals true. Those are all basically the settings that we need for widevine port, so you can copy that. And what I'll do is actually show you it working. And so what I'm going to do is actually come across itv.com and show you what the issue is. Even though this is enabled, what's going to happen, and it only happens on ITV, not channel 4, is when it decides to load and we refresh the page. Here we go, you bugger. Right. Okay. Firefox is installing components needed to play the audio video on this page. Please try again later. You can see this is whirring away. Even though you've got everything set up, it just does this for a minute or two. And just take you across to channel 4. Screeners. Okay, I'm not going to play anything copyright, but I just want to show you that it actually works. So see, we're getting that as well. Normally we don't actually get that in that's one of the annoying things. Even only happens the first time you go on the page. Refresh that, come back to this one, see if it's still going away, but it does actually kick in after a minute or two. But I just wanted to show you what the issue is. Sort of, you know, even if I refresh, it's still doing that. it's just a bit annoying. Let me just see if I can get it working here on this one. I don't know if it's just because I'm doing two at the same time. It might be giving it a few issues, but it does work. Honestly, it does. You just seem to get it more on ITV than Channel 4. Let me just close that one in case it's interfering. It does honestly work, but it's just because I'm doing a video, it's going to take longer just to piss me off. And what happens is eventually it does actually kick in and turn into a play button, and uBlock Origin will actually block the adverts that typically appear. Typically, you actually get these forced 1 minute 30-second adverts before the video. Okay, you can see here now it's changed to watch film. There we go. See, now it's playing. I'm going to stop it there just because, you know, copyright and all that. I just wanted to show you actually how long it took for it to actually kick in. Okay, so that's everything. There we go. We got what I'll also do while I think of it is you can see how I've got a transparency and alacrity and Emacs. Alacrity. Okay. So what you see here is my Alacrity config, and I'll put links to everything under the video. Under the Windows section here, we've got opacity 0.90. So that's how we set the opacity to 90. And the reason I chose that is because you then still have a good contrast with the commands. Anything lower, I found that the contrast between the text and the background was not great. For Emacs, config early.init. Okay. Yeah. Oh, actually, while I think of it, I want to show you the title bar. Where's the title bar? Colors. Yeah, window decoration none. That's how we remove the title bar. Typically, you'd normally get a big title bar up there with the X button and all that kind of crap. So decorations none removes that. And in my Emacs early init, I set them to be the screen, the frame to be maximized. This is how you set the no title bar, so you can see there's no title bar. But you can see this little chappy over here. If I click that, I've got all the options that would normally be in the title bar. And this is how we actually add the opacity. So opacity down here, add hooks, all that kind of stuff. So that's just something else I'll mention. But as I said, what I'll do is I'll put links to the documentation, my configuration files for the root and all my dot files, so that you can just go through and pinch what's needed. And hopefully that's got you set up with nixos ZFS on root, so I can do I do ZFS list-t snapshot. What you'll see here is these are the automatic snapshots that are created every hour. See here, zpool, is it list? Yeah, there we go. You can see the zpool list there. So yeah, that's the ZFS automatic snapshots. So basically, what will happen? Let me just close that file. Is the system is automatically upgraded in the configuration.nix. So every day it's going to check for updates. It's automatically going to update. It's going to do the garbage collection, scrubbing the pools, all that kind of stuff. So literally all I have to do is I run a Emacs package upgrade all to update the packages. It's possible to actually install packages using Home Manager, but what I found is they didn't work with my configuration. So the options that I set in my Emacs configuration weren't taking effect with packages installed using Home Manager. So I install the packages Emacs. So those are all the Emacs packages that I use, and so I just run backup all, package upgrade all to upgrade that. So that's all I need to do for Emacs. To update all my applications, I just run home manager switch. That's it. So that's all you have to do to actually keep everything up to date, is just run home manager switch. That's it, and it will update. Your system's updated automatically, and you just manually run home manager switch to create a new version of the packages. There's a way to actually delete previous versions, revisions of the packages, but I can't remember offhand how you do that. You can also get into flakes if you want, but I've never really got into them. So I think that's all for now. I've been going for about an hour and a half, so hopefully I've covered everything in depth. You might want to keep a copy of the video on your phone or something to watch as you're going along on any of those points I mentioned, because quite a few of them weren't mentioned in the ZFS nixos wiki setup, especially how you can echo these variables into the hardware configuration file to make it easy to actually put in the right device. So I'll leave it there for now, and hope that helps.